Okay, so you ready for me to go on to July
Okay,
16th?
we have July 16th, yes. There's another white one. It says July 16th at the top.
Wait,
Cindy, do you have, Board Member Davis, do you have a question?
If I have an amendment on TSSA, can I bring it back if I was on the prevailing side? Can I make a motion to bring it back to discuss again? Okay, I make a motion to bring back, what number was it?
1211.
Number 1211.
Will you name the rule?
It is?
It's a 4-0.
It's the TSSA.
So the motion is to bring it back to reconsider its action.
No, it's not 1211.
Oh, yes, but we didn't make a motion on this date. We made a motion on this date. So the discussion.
1111. Thank you, 1111.
I didn't hear it.
It's 1111.
The rule, so I'm trying to find it. Does it show the rule?
R277-927, Draft 6. Teacher and Student Success Act.
I'll find it later. Okay, we have a motion to bring it back. Oh, thanks.
Motion to reconsider its action.
Oh, 1211?
That's the name of the rule.
Okay. I think I've got it here. Right here. Got it. Thanks.
It's a motion to reconsider the
Most,
board's action.
so you have a motion to reconsider to bring this back, correct? Can we have a second? And we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This is to bring it back.
To bring it back. Those opposed? Okay, it's back for reconsideration.
You don't have to do it now, you can do it after.
So, do we just knock it out now? Because it's back? You guys, without objection, let's go. Are you ready? Okay.
I move to add after line 105 to insert the following. For purposes of calculating an LEA's average teacher salary as required in section 53G-7-1304, beginning with the 2021-2022 school year, and if data is available, the superintendent may consider a school district's or LEA's base salary without including additional hours or salary earned under a productivity compensation model. And I'll speak to the motion.
Yes, will you?
I'd like to.
Yes, please speak.
Okay. This just gives an option. We can't do this now because we are using 2018 data for the average salary calculations for this coming year. Under the TSSA Act, if you fall under the average teacher salary, then you get to use 40% of TSSA money toward teacher salary, and if you fall over the average salary, then you can use 25% of that allocation. So what this would do, there are some districts, say if you have a district that has a community ed program at night that pays their teachers through that, or your coaches get a stipend, or you have a model where you have your basic hours that every teacher in the state teaches, but you pay your teachers to work an extra 2 hours a day or to buy an eighth in secondary, that these calculations, if with our new systems and things, we get the opportunity to divide out base salary and productivity compensation, that our average salaries throughout the state will be based on base salaries. So those who might be thinking outside the box on productivity models and things like that won't be penalized in that scenario.
Okay. Board Member Lear?
Just a technical correction. If
Okay.
data are available.
Oh, thank you. I'll fix it.
Data's
Board Member Scott Hansen?
Just a question.
Only applies to school districts, charters are not.
Okay.
And
I was just looking at it.
I'm ready for your question.
okay, I don't know if you can answer or not. How much is this productivity compensation affecting average salary? Do we know?
It depends. It depends on the school and on the district, and it also depends if you're taking on extra activities. In secondary, there are stipends that go into salaries. In my district, we have a basic model where elementary school teachers get paid an additional seventh if they work an extra hours in the day on top of what our, a normal teacher schedule is. In secondary, it could be an eighth if a secondary principal buys an eighth, but 1 year, but doesn't buy an eighth the next year. So they're fluctuating productivity pieces.
So no real estimate
No.
of what the average deviation to
Not
the
at this
average
point,
would be?
because up to this point, we have not
But you
used
can't track it.
data for anything.
If I might, we've got a couple gentlemen in the back that might be able to comment and answer that question of maybe what that percentage is. Board Member Hanson, if I can invite Terry and, well, one of the two, both of you come up, if you would. I'm trying to remember his name.
Chair, while they're coming up,
That's
may I
right.
make one comment?
Okay.
Board Member Davis, you're correct. In this instance, it should be LEA, not school district. I apologize. In that section of code, there's portions that apply only to school districts and some that apply to LEAs. So I made the change from is to are and district to LEA. So it's now updated on the screen.
Okay, you guys want to introduce yourselves? We had a question.
Terry Shoemaker with the Utah School Board Association, the Utah School Superintendents Association, and I'm glad Todd is here with us. So Todd?
Okay, that's not, oh, here we go. Now it is. Go ahead.
Todd Arbor.
Well, it's trying to. There it is.
If it's red, it's good? Okay. Good thing I don't have a big belly. Todd Harbor, Business Administrator, Park City School District, and liaison for UASBO.
So we're just now seeing and hearing this for the first time. So if you would ask us the questions you think we can, or we're going to tell you if we can, we'll tell you what we know, but tell us what you would like us to try to respond to, because this amendment does affect school districts way differently, depending on their compensation model.
Okay. The percentage, you can't get it, you probably can't speak to that, and that's a question that Board Member Scott Hanson had, like how, what percent?
Maybe Scott can give us Board Member Hanson can give us the question again so we can see if we can respond or not.
Okay. Board Member Scott Hanson?
Just to restate, I understand that the data we have right now is not so precise, but I'm wondering if we have some kind of a rough order of magnitude on the average, how the average is affected by this productivity compensation.
Yeah,
or
and we were
compensation
both
over
involved with that, and I
base.
think Todd Hauber can talk about how it was created in the first place, because we were involved in that conversation with Scott Jones and trying to figure this out. But the additional compensations may or may not be in that, which is what this amendment is dealing with.
Yeah, so I don't know the orders of magnitude. That will vary from district to district. In Park City, we have a base lane, and then we have enhancements to that base lane. I'm assuming that would fall under the productivity compensation model definition. I'm not sure what that definition is. And then you have also the additional work assignments, I think, that were described that are in addition to a base. In Park City, that can range from 5 to 20%, depending on if you're a coach with athletic programs or if you're doing after-school programming and things of that nature. So it really moves widely.
So maybe I could follow up on the district level. How much additional? You got your base salary for all your teachers, and then you've got this additional. How much would that be as a percentage?
And that will also vary from district to district. So in Park City, it's so base compensation's probably around $38 million, and we probably have enhancements of another $500,000. So it's not a huge percentage in that case, but I don't know the full definition of productivity compensation model. So so that I could add another $500,000 if that means after school work that teachers are doing instead of some other professionals.
But maybe $1 million on, if
It
everything
could be,
about base
yeah.
would be $1 million on 38 million?
Could be, yeah,
Give or take.
something in that range. And that's just me. That's one district.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Linda Hansen, you guys just hang here for a minute, please.
So somebody who worked on this legislation, Terry,
Yeah.
so do you have some kind of idea on what the intent was? Was the intent to count it all, or the intent to do base salary, or did that not come up? Because I don't want to do anything if the intent
The
was
general
the
intent
opposite.
was, as I understand it, was the salary, the 181, their base salary, 181-day salary.
Okay.
And then, and this is where,
180-day, what that contract year is, salary.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Do we need to define productivity compensation model?
Would be helpful.
Because if
Well-
if we're setting aside that as something that could possibly be out of the calculation, we have to
Are
know
you
what
asking
that
us?
is. And so I'm just saying, for this rule, we may need to have a definition for what we're saying a productivity model is if we go this route.
You could, are you asking me?
Well, looking for someone, Superintendent Dixon might be able to answer the question.
Well, I only know of one district that frames it in that term, and that's Alpine. I think, to Board Member Davis's point, there are a lot of variations on
The same
lanes
thing,
and things that are
yeah.
added in, but the label of productivity model, to my knowledge, in terms of the districts, only Alpine uses that terminology. Is that correct to your knowledge?
That would be correct. So,
Go ahead.
Board Member Cummins, to your question, I think the intent wasn't necessarily to include all of these additional compensation pieces. Not that they aren't significant. In Alpine, they would be significant. So I can understand why Board Member Davis is probably hearing from that school district, because it affects their average teacher salary. Which one do we use? And how they calculate that will make a difference there. But it was not considered in this way as the bill was being put together, as the bill was being discussed. It's not that it isn't important, and certainly, I'm not saying it shouldn't be addressed, but I can tell you it was not discussed as we were working with the legislator to put these pieces together. We were trying to keep it reasonably simple so we could get at calculating this average teacher salary.
Angie.
I just thought I might add something, if I might, and I'm going to try and channel my colleague, Deputy Jones, in the back here. But part of the reason this is coming up is when the TSSA was created, we've been
Skills that
salary data, but it never was used for purposes of distributing money or for any kind of program. And so LEAs have been reporting salary data, but it's not necessarily apples to apples. One LEA like Alpine might be reporting $100,000 salary for the teacher, but the base salary is only 60, and then the other 40 is because they are coaching, they're doing extra hours, they're doing summer school, et cetera. So part of what I think Board Member Davis is wanting to do here is signal to the LEAs moving forward. Both the superintendent, so USBE staff, as well as LEAs, should be more deliberate and precise with how we submit data, so that if in the future we do want to allow LEAs to kind of separate base salary from stipends, from productivity models, where it's, and you know more about what that means, that this is an attempt to start collecting that data in a way that we could use it in different ways. Currently, you'll see that 21-22 is in there. And that's because the data that we are using for this school year, for example, was actually 17-18. And now the data that will be used for the 2020-21 school year was collected just barely in the 18-19 school year. So now the first time that we'll possibly be able to do this will likely be with the 21-22 school year. So part of the point I'm trying to make here is we have time to find out how to define productivity model. But I think what Board Member Davis wants to do most of all is to signal to LEAs, let's start collecting this data, and then if we can, the superintendent will use that. Is that correct?
Okay, my concern here is as this thing was crafted and a lot of work was put into this and a lot of BA input, there's superintendents as they've been playing with this model, and then here's this last term betterment coming in, and now we have another amendment on here. I'm sitting there, put myself in a local BA superintendent board's position, and I'm sitting there going, you know what? I want money. And I need money, and I want this TSA money, and I want to be able to take it, and I want to put it to salaries. How do I manipulate the system? And if I get into this model of, if I want to go mirror somebody else's model to drive my compensation down instead of saying, okay, here's my base, and there's this evolution that happens in every one of these LEAs of how they come up with their compensation, and they are unique. Are we trying to standardize that? What are we really trying to accomplish here? And I see with this change here, it's all about having your salary down, so I can get money, and or the tax side and everything else that there's reasons that the legislators put this whole thing together and taxed it and tied it to tax and everything else, and this is the first I've seen this, and I don't know if I don't see it maybe as a betterment because it wasn't talked about before, and it wasn't that important before when all of this base salary discussion was happening, and so I have a great deal of concern. We have some more comments here. Angie, did you have more? Terry, did you? And then I'll go to the board.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Chair Huntsman, I think you're right on the money here. And I appreciate the fact that we're forward-looking here, because I think it can only be done that way. But I think what we're trying to do is land in a spot so that this board will know how to allocate the funds based on a formula or based on a standard that everybody understands. So if you intend to further clarify that standard, we already have school districts who have made negotiated agreements based on what they thought the money was going to be right now. That's why you have to think forward, okay? However, if I've already made that agreement, it's already forever. If it's a negotiated agreement for a school district, typically in salaries and benefits. So we're going to have to be very thoughtful about how we approach this to make sure because when you look at the adjustments, the ranges between those who qualified to go from 25 to 40%, in some cases was very, very close. Very, very close. And that adjustment could make a great big difference.
Okay. We've got more board questions or comments. Board Member Davis.
I appreciate all of these comments, and it's actually really a great discussion. I think that we could take off the words productivity compensation model and just, superintendent doesn't have to, but may consider an LEA's base salary without including additional hours. This is something that we're going to have to think about moving forward, because we want to, I think, start having our LEAs report base salary information and report what are all the additional enhancements, and what does that look like? And if we're going to start creating legislation and board rule that is giving disbursements based on these average salaries, then we need better data than we have right now. And so maybe I need to hold this particular amendment, and we need to look at something else as far as reporting goes. But this has opened a new door, and we don't have good data, in my opinion. So I'm willing to pull it if we feel like we need to pull it, but we certainly need to think about it moving forward.
I agree. Board Member Scott Hansen.
Yeah, I'd speak for the sentiment behind the amendment, but I do think that we're premature, and I don't think we should penalize teachers for working overtime and doing that sort of thing. That shouldn't be what's happening, but I do think that if we went through with this without the data, we could potentially create an incentive to keep base salaries low, also to manipulate things. And my idea would be that we wait until we get some data, and then we see how we can do this. I also think that the effect of this would maybe not be as much as you think, because the average teacher salary for the state would be adjusted to cut all those out.
I agree.
And so everything would, we would lower
Agreed.
the water level
For everyone.
for everyone.
But we'd have a clearer picture.
Yeah, but we don't know right now what that looks like, and I would think if we wait until the data is available, we can see what's there, run some test data, and see how this plays out.
Okay. Board Member Davis.
Okay, so I'll withdraw that amendment.
Well, I appreciate the conversation, and I usually don't speak up on a lot of issues, but I felt like I had to on this one.
The group has to agree.
Okay, so, what's that?
The group has to agree. They have to agree.
Oh.
No, they just have to keep it without objection.
Okay, yeah. Without objection, then we'll pull this one. Okay, thank you. Good conversation, which might lead to a whole different conversation outside of this TSSA on this data and how we get it and try to get, and it might be something in rule where we say these are the guidelines for these reporting requirements. So, thank you. Ms. Lorraine, where are we? It's almost 5 o'clock. Are did we get our data?
We have it. Can we
Okay, can we
untable?
bring back, I can bring it back. Let's bring back, Scott, let's bring back the AISU motion.
Chair,
Okay, so let me just bring the board back to where this is. So what we do, in the interest of time and everything else, so we're bringing this back, and so when we bring it back, there is a motion on the table that's been seconded, which is this motion, and there was some questions asked, and Scott was to answer them. Scott, you're up.
Yep. First question was, what's the overall budget for the State Charter School Board? It's $4,100,000 rounded approximately. The total amount owed between both the federal and the state is $416,000. So that represents 10% of the budget. It's been reported to us previously by the executive director of the SCSB that they had set aside $400,000 for school closure purposes, and we're not tracking any encumbrances or obligations towards that $400,000 as of this date time group.
Okay. Questions? Board Member Scott Hansen?
Yeah, just a quick one. The due dates for this obligation?
Well, we've actually gone overdue on the due dates. I mean, the school actually closed, and the findings were way back in, before the school actually even closed, that we had the findings. So we're actually overdue on both, especially with the federal payment, the $176,000.
So are we
for that.
receiving, I'd imagine, there's some substantial pressure from the feds. What about the state? Can they give us some leeway on when the payback date might be?
We've been in contact and communication with them. They understand the situation, and ultimately they've said, well, our position is that the state is responsible or liable for the amount that's owed to the federal government. We do incur interest. It's not a lot, but it still does incur, and we'll cover that. We'll make sure that gets covered as well. But that's again why we've asked for a date, like of August 30th, so that at least we're showing our due diligence, and we're in the process of meeting these obligations that were determined by the fiscal operations staff in the special education section. So,
Just one more quick follow-up.
Okay,
So
follow up.
The Fed federal debt, could that, the state debt, could that possibly be pushed off past the August 31st if we?
Yeah, there's nothing I'm aware of in the law or board rule or anything like that that stipulates like within 30, within 60, within 90 days you have to pay that. So I think we have some room there.
Concerned that once we pay this off, some of the pressure to do a good job with the liquidation and that sort of thing might also be.
Right.
Okay. Board Member Lear?
Who owns the property, Scott?
So and that's been one of the core issues as part of this process is without proper or sufficient documentation to show exactly how that laptop was bought. Or
No,
how,
I meant the real estate that the school sits
Oh,
on.
that's owned. Yeah, that's owned by a private company. It's not owned by the state or anything like that. So
is the school, can I ask a
Yeah, follow-up.
Is the school been renting that property?
yes, they leased it. Yes.
Oh, leasing.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
they leased it. Yes.
Thank
yes,
you.
ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. Board Member Davis?
So we're limited to what we read in the newspapers, right? Because we haven't talked about this issue. I don't know what's right and wrong, but what is the relationship between the charter that closed and the private school that was the partner with the charter school? And is there any way to get some of these resources paid back from the private school that partnered opening the charter school? I see our legal counsel answering
We need
that.
to, let me just bring up,
That has to be talked about in executive session.
yeah, this
ma'am.
is executive session item.
Yep.
Okay. Then I withdraw the comment.
Okay. So the motion before the board is that the board, I'll restate the motion, not seeing any other discussion, and that is that the board approve the setting aside of $415,689.28 for the state, from the state charter school board budget in order to meet the required amounts due to the federal and state government, and that the board approve the payment of both debts on August 31st, 2019, unless the state charter school board and/or USBE staff provide appropriate and allowable funds to meet the obligations by that date. That is the motion that's on the table. Seeing Board Member Scott Hansen.
I'll come back to just to follow up with my question to Scott about the August 31st date. And we make a motion to amend to pay the federal debt by August 31st, just to pay the federal debt on August 31st instead of both debts.
Okay, do you want to speak to your proposed, well, let's see if we get a second on the amendment.
I'll second it.
Second board member, do you want to speak to your proposed amendment?
Sure. I think that I spoke to it a little bit before, but I believe the state debt can probably be pushed off as far as the date of payment. And I think the longer that's, if that's open and due and not paid up, there may be some incentive to maximize our returns on the liquidation.
Board Member Belknap?
I actually would look at that just as the opposite, that there is no incentive to get the thing sold and done and get this over with. There is no school, there is no board, there's nothing. They closed their doors yesterday. So the sooner we do it, I think it's more advantageous to us.
Follow up?
Yes, follow up.
I'm sorry. And maybe we're stepping into the closed session. So who is going to do these activities as far as
The question is who's what?
who's going to take care of the liquidation activities?
Well, that's a
state charter
That's an
school
easy
board.
answer. Scott, will you answer that one? That's not an executive.
Yeah, the State Charter School Board is responsible for the liquidation. We are assisting in the liquidation of the buses and the vans because it's put on the state surplus site, and we have access to that site, and as you know, or probably saw, you see the buses out in the parking lot. So we're helping. We're not, we're trying to be cooperative in the effort, but it's very clear that the State Charter School Board is responsible for the liquidation processes for any school closure, not just this one,
Board Member
any school
Lear?
closure.
Sorry, this is kind of a shot across the bow, so I want to make sure I understand it.
Okay.
So does the charter board know that you're making this proposal, Laura? And how, is it just a laughable question to say, how would the charter board respond, or does the charter board feel it's the obligation? Do you know? You or Scott,
Well,
if I can ask the chair.
the question is, does the state charter school board know this motion's on the table?
Right.
They know
And do you
now,
know if
and it
they, if, you know,
wasn't.
if the board feels some responsibility for the debt?
Okay.
You know.
Let me speak to this
Okay, go
just a
ahead.
little bit. In quite a few of our meetings, as things were moving forward, there's been discussion. There was anticipated in our finance meetings and some other meetings that this was going to be talked about and that fund did exist. I personally have had meetings with them where that's been brought to their attention that they have that fund and a few other things, but the bottom line when it comes to dollars, and there is not a recommendation from the state. There is not a recommendation on the table from the state charter school board to put a reserve on any funds at all. There's nothing. Am I clear Scott, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so we're the ones that are fiscally responsible for all of these funds. And so this motion is in our preview to take and act. And then also within this, within the motion, the state charter school board can come back by August 31 with proposals, money, sales of goods, or whatever it is to resolve this. The other thing is after the dust settles on this board still has the authority to put money back in or move. We still have the capability to go within our own, I call it digging in the couch, looking and putting money back into their system. But right now it's hanging out there. We have legislators and other people saying, okay, you coming back to us? Where's this money coming from? And we don't know how much it is. And so this is where we're at. It's not driven by the legislature, but there's a lot of concerned public out there that public funds that are that other programs will be cut and or in jeopardy because of this funding challenge. And so this isn't going to take any of that away, but it just says we know how we want to deal with it. And if we change our mind in a month or two to do something different, we can.
Thank you.
Chair, given that, I'll withdraw that motion to amend based on the information that was just received.
Okay.
I think I need a second, though, because it was seconded.
Second, I second.
Okay. Let me what's that? Without objection. Okay, we're good. Right. I'll say this again. You guys are going to get tired of me. Okay, the motion on the table is the board approved the setting aside of $415,689.28 from the state charter school board budget in order to meet the required amounts due to the federal and state government, and that the board approve the payment of both debts on August 31st, 2019, unless the state charter school board and or USBE staff provide appropriate and allowable funds to meet the obligations by the state. I don't see any discussion, so let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Okay, so we are done with the not so fun part of finance. Is that? Or,
We have July 16th left.
okay, we're with that, done with that. Okay, July 16th. Is that where we're at?
That chair, point of order.
Yes. Yes. 10-minute break. And then we're ready to go. Thank you. I need that break. Okay, we are July 16th, finance. Chair Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. We're on 13.4 Residential Treatment Center Temporary Special Education Program Certification. The board recently approved R277927 to begin monitoring special education programs in private residential treatment centers across the state for the purpose of providing free and appropriate education or FAPE to these students. The California Department, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Do you want me to?
No.
Okay, thank you. The California Department of Education is sending a request letter to USBE, which will be available for the August board meeting, but they've asked, staff will provide monthly updates to the committee showing which RTCs applied for the temporary certification and which RTCs have been monitored. The committee action was Board Member Huntsman moved and the committee voted unanimously to recommend that the board allow RTCs that apply for certification by August 30th, 2019 to be provided a temporary certification until their applications can be reviewed and a site visit conducted, at which time each RTC will either be approved or for a 2-year term or denied the certificate. The motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board provide a temporary certification to RTCs that apply for certification by August 30th, 2019, until their applications can be reviewed and a site visit conducted, at which time each RTC will either be approved for a 2-year term or denied certification.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board provide a temporary certification to RTCs that apply for certification by August 30th, 2019, until their applications can be reviewed and a site visit conducted, at which time each RTC will either be approved for a 2-year term or denied certification. So motion before the board. Discussion to that motion, Board Member Lear.
As you know, I do not like this. I think that the board was pressured into it. These are non-Utah students. Our special ed staff is already going to be, which is already stretched thin, is going to be required to do this, as are other staff members. And so I have 2 motions related to this, and because it's not a rule, I don't know that maybe you want to consider them together, or maybe you'd want to consider them separate. One of them is about what I would like to do, ask the staff to do, to explore in terms of recouping this cost, and the other one is an amendment to the motion.
I think your first is just I have a request and what it would take and what it cost and whether it's worth it. So I think you can follow the I have a request
Okay.
pathway, and then if that's okay with you, and we'll make sure that it gets followed through. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So let me do the first one
Okay.
first then.
Yeah, then you're-
I'd like the USBE staff to explore charging states a reasonable but revenue-neutral fee for doing this work for students from other states. And in doing that, of course, they gather data in this first year to find out how much it costs. And I think they should do it on all of these residential treatment centers that have, and I'll let them find the percentage. But my understanding is they're going to be 90% non-Utah kids. And if it should be those centers that are 70% or 90%, I'll let that percentage be recommended by the staff. But is that clear, Leah? Did I express that, what I'd like to have
Okay.
happen?
Before I recognize that as a motion, but I
I'm
don't think it
sorry.
has to be a motion, but do you want to add clarity? Okay, please
So,
do.
of course, it's going to depend on which...
Name and title.
Oh, excuse me. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. Thanks. It will depend on the residential treatment center, what percentage of students are Utah students versus out-of-state students. But many of the residential treatment centers that I've been interacting with, the majority are out-of-state students.
Right. But majority by quite a lot,
By
right?
quite a lot.
Not just 51%.
Correct.
Right, and I understand that. I'm just looking for the staff to recommend both a fee and then based on a certain percentage of Utah, non-Utah students. That's my first moment.
But I think you can follow that under the request is, and I think, first of all, we got to know, can we, with the agreements that we have, can we, and then what would that look like? Is that but you already know we
Well,
can.
yeah, and I don't think can we is a very big question. We're doing a service for students from out of state, so, and that apparently has to be done, but it doesn't mean we have to do it for free.
Okay.
So that's the first, and then the second motion is.
Well, let's do the first motion first.
Okay. Just a
It's just
request.
it's a
Okay.
request, so it's not,
We don't need to vote on it, I guess.
right, okay?
Okay. Second part, at the end of the motion that Laura made, I'd like to add, and again, this is not necessarily exact language, but if certification is proved, continued certification for the 2-year period is subject to ongoing compliance with 277-926 and applicable Utah and federal laws, so that these service, no, that's the motion, and can I speak to that? Pretty well speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
I was trying to,
Yeah, just,
okay, wait,
it's the
I'd
red.
like to
It's the red
restate
on the
it, but
bottom.
did somebody hear it well enough to second it?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. You want to speak to that motion while it's being
Sure.
crafted in the interest of time?
My concern is I don't want, once these centers are approved, I don't want them, I want to make it crystal clear to them that if there are violations during the 2-year period, that they will be, that they can have that certification revoked. And that they will be on pins and needles for 2 years, wondering if they're going to be compliant enough to keep their certificate.
Okay. Cindy, did you want to speak to the, okay, Board Member Davis?
So I just have a few questions, and I'm going to ask them in succession. I want to say, how is this our problem? But I know how it is. I know that we, by law, we have to do this. But what does certification imply? Would California and Illinois take a temporary waiver as opposed to a temporary certification? Because I could vote for that. Are we culpable if we certify even temporarily? Those are my questions.
I mean,
Chair, would you like me to address those
Yes,
questions?
if you would.
Okay, the first question, remind me what the first one was. I remember the middle one.
I won't repeat the first one, but what does certification imply? When they get certification, and we've made the visit, we certify them, what does that mean we are attesting to?
That their program, that the special education program is compliant with IDEA, with the Utah Special Education Rule, and with your State Board of Education rule, that the program is compliant.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
So with no visit, how can we certify that they are compliant even if temporarily? Can we do a waiver instead of a certification?
Yeah.
So that's a great question. So the application, which I included in your, in Civic Clerk, has the rule broken down to all of the different requirements that the RTC would have to demonstrate that they're meeting, all the compliance requirements, and then evidence for each of those requirements. So the 7 applications that I have received to this point are folders of evidence that go along with that application. So the applications that I have currently do have documentation with them, and I haven't reviewed them because I don't have personnel yet to review them, but that documentation to go with each one of the requirements in your rule in order to demonstrate that they are meeting requirements. So, to your point, I would not be able to, my staff would not be able to verify complete compliance of the rule without being on site. But we do have paper documentation that is submitted with the application of quite a bit of the requirements in your rule.
Superintendent Dixon, do you want to add to the?
Yeah,
Physical evidence?
if I can add to that, Board Member Davis, I mean, it's similar to what we do with other programs where we call it like a desk audit. We do a desk audit, which gives us sort of I guess you would say a minimal or at least enough evidence that you feel like you can move forward on whatever, and then you do a deeper dive. So it's a typical process that we use with other programs with that initial paperwork desk trial.
follow-up?
I guess this is for legalities in other states, which is a little different, in my opinion, than what we do within our own state. I mean, I'd feel more comfortable voting for a waiver, but a temporary waiver.
Okay. Okay, the proposed amendment. Is, what do you have? Is that read right, Board Member Lear?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a proposed amendment that has been seconded. I'll restate it, and we can vote on the amendment.
Can I
No,
speak?
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. We're speaking to the proposed amendment.
So is this amendment to the rule?
There's no rule, it's just an amendment. I'm sorry, can I answer that?
Because
Well, it's an amendment to the recommendation because we're not in compliance.
It's,
2 year,
It's
the
not a
2
rule.
year is in the rule, right? The
Right.
certification for 2 years is in the rule, and so this would technically be an amendment to a rule that isn't up before us right now.
which is true of the whole, I mean, none of this is, the rule is not before us in anything that is being recommended. So I think it's as legitimate as anything that's before us is my point. And my point in that is to say to California, Illinois, and other states that your 2-year, if you didn't know this before, your 2-year certification is dependent on ongoing compliance, which is probably understood, but this is a reminder.
So let me reach out, Leah, to Vice Chair Brittany Cummins' question. It's almost like, why are we here and why are we talking about this? Can you speak to that, of why this is relevant and why this is before us?
Yes, so this request to provide a temporary certification came directly from the California Board of Education because the California certification of these RTCs expires at the end of September. Their certification process starts on October 1 and goes through September 30th. And because of their legislative action and their state law, without Utah certification, the RTCs will not be eligible for California certification. So they will lose certification, which means students will lose access to the RTCs, and students' services would be interrupted at best. They'll have to transition to other locations. The IEP teams, the LEAs would have to find another location. It could be a very dramatic change for the students. So the California Department of Education requested that we consider providing temporary certification until our process is up and running, the process that you have outlined in rule, and we can provide or deny certification to these RTCs. Does that answer your question, Vice Chair?
Yes, so my question was the appropriateness of the amendment, which is attempting to change the 2-year time, or adding language to the 2-year time period, which is in rule, when we're just doing a temporary authorization, not addressing the actual verbiage in the rule. So that was my question at that point, so. But
In the interest of time, sorry, Brittany.
No, go ahead.
In the interest of time, I think this is more of a message statement than it is. If you're hung up about this not being in the rule, I think it should go without saying. They should know that their compliance has to be from week to week, not just every 2 years.
Okay.
So I could withdraw that second part if that would make it easier for you to feel comfortable with that, or others too.
Superintendent Dixon.
We could actually add in a statement, Board Member Lear, in the temporary certification as well that would amplify that.
That would,
Okay.
feel-
I think that would take care of that.
And can I add one more thing, Brittany, to my point?
Board Member
Leah, when you say California would be responsible for it wouldn't, those students couldn't go without services. It would just be California's problem.
Correct. It is not our
and
problem. Oh,
Now
excuse me, Chair.
California is making it Utah's problem. Hurry up, because we have an emergency, and solve our problem for us.
Superintendent Dixon?
This is sort of a yes and. Yes, they created the law, and the board now has a rule. The challenge is that where it lies with us is the time frame from when we received the money from the legislature to hire someone, issues that we had with hiring someone and trying to now go out and conduct these. We're also in a very shortened window that has forced this function between now and the expiration of their certification.
Correct.
So, I mean, just going back to where this all started, that part, it's a forcing function for us as well of a shortened window of trying to get some help to get in and certify all these. In a better world, we would have been able to hire somebody in February or March, and a lot of this work would have been done. But here we are in August with a pending window, so it does force the function of some kind of temporary authorization, which is why I suggested that we bring this motion before you.
Board Member Hanson?
Well, and I should say California requested it, but the motion comes before you.
All of the concerns about California and Illinois and stuff aside, it concerns me if we're saying, this is your problem because the kids are here. And I'm concerned about students, whether they're California students or Illinois students or Utah students. Let's make sure we're doing best by students. And you know, I went out to an invitation. I went out to one of these in Tooele, and they explained to me this problem several months ago. They are concerned about their students. They want to be compliant. They're not trying to get around anything. They're trying to be compliant too, and they're concerned about their kids. And so I feel like we need to think about the kids.
Okay. Board Member Bolter?
Two things. First of all, the programs these facilities are in Utah, correct? Do they not already meet IDEA standards and Utah state standards? Shouldn't they already meet those standards?
I respond, Chair.
Okay.
Yes. So that's one of the interesting pieces of this conundrum is that they are all certified already by California. They've been through pretty intense processes. I went and participated with California in that process for one of the RTCs. Their monitoring process is pretty intense already, but the legislature in California created this law that then the State Board of Education has to implement, which then we got stuck with.
So that brings me to my second point. Sorry, but California, quite honestly, I don't feel has a right to tell us, to create a law that says, hey, Utah, you have to do this. And then why are we bending over backwards and saying, okay, well, we're going to do it, instead of going to California and saying, look, if you want to send your students here, it's certified. It's just frustrating. Every time this comes up, I'm just frustrated that another state gets to say what we get to do within our facilities in law, and then we're bending over backwards to do it. And I'm all about taking care of the students, but if we're already meeting these things, then I'm with Carol, if we're going to do this, then they should cover some of the costs of what it will be, or they can change that law, because in my book, they have no right to tell Utah what we can and cannot do with our facilities, and then we're over here bending backwards. How many more states are going to require this stuff?
Superintendent Dixon?
I think that
I'm just frustrated.
I hear what you're saying, Board Member Bolter. However, these are Utah businesses, so it's Utah businesses bringing economics into our state. So it doesn't completely absolve us just to say it's their issue. These are our businesses serving our students along with California and with Illinois. So I just have to put that out there, that it's not just about us following a law, but they're in Utah businesses. So it makes it a little more convoluted than that.
Okay, a follow-up? She's responding to you, so there you go.
So it's Utah businesses, then is it a private entity then, and why is it our money?
So when you say our money, you're talking about,
Isn't it state fund, like our education funds to do this, or it's not?
Leah, you can address where that.
Okay, Leah.
So the Utah legislature awarded the State Board of Education $100,000 to be able to provide this monitoring process. So it's for half of an FTE.
Okay.
Is the calculation that I did in order to request that money based on, at the time, the 23 RTCs that would need licensing. So the Utah legislature did provide you with a line item for $100,000 to
do
provide
this.
this monitoring process.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we're doing it, correct? So it comes back to why are we here and why are we doing it? Okay, Board Member Davis.
I want to thank you for the clarification, because when I say, how is this our problem, I'm not talking about the children. I'm talking about the speed and the requirement. We're going to pass a law, and now you have to say that something great is happening for kids when we can't verify that it is. And we have a responsibility to students to verify that it is. So if we feel like the paperwork is enough, and, it kind of is our problem, and we're a little bit culpable because it sounds like we did have time to get the people in place, but we had some difficulties finding or however that worked out. So it sounds like we may have a part there as well.
Superintendent?
Yeah, just to be clear, so the legislature sent us the money in July, meaning that we can't spend the money before July. So when I say February, March, I'm just saying, when when this interest was brought forth to us, and I think we discussed this back then, maybe in March or April, because we were trying to do our part instead of having it legislated to us. So when we were discussing it at that time, then there's nothing really we could do without the funding. So we had to wait for that to come July 1. That was part one. We were hoping to have somebody queued up by July 1 so that when we got the money, it was a slick transition. That's the part that didn't happen that put us in the space we're in today. So I just want to clarify that it wasn't anybody dragging their feet. It was just the timing with the money and the circumstance of the handoff wasn't as slick as we thought it could be. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Board Member Lear?
Simplify this and say, we've asked the staff to track the costs. I do expect it'll cost more than half of an FTE, but that's my opinion. I've asked for that. I can withdraw the second part. You'll communicate that they have to continue to comply, and that's what I want to. I'm just not going to stop harping on this. I think this is really the wrong way to go about serving students, although I am all about kids. But California should have offered $1,000 a kid, plus the FTE, and I think that we got shortchanged. So I'll let it go. So I'll withdraw that if everybody's.
Without objection, are we good to withdraw the proposed
Yes.
amendment? Okay, it's withdrawn. So the motion before the board is that the board provide a temporary certification to RTCs that apply for certification by August 30th, 2019, until their application can be reviewed and a site visit conducted, at which time each RTC will either be approved for a 2-year term or denied certification. That is the motion before the board. Not seeing any discussion, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
I think we've got all ayes with the one no. Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Chair Belknap, please continue.
Oh, I dare not. Okay. 13.5, out-of-state tuition reimbursement. This is for students that live within the district of a resident but attend school out of state. So for example, those who live on the borders of our state and another one, and it's closer to go to school in another place. 3 districts applied for the tuition reimbursement. They are Box Elder for a little more than $54,000, South Summit for a little more than $18,000. Kane did not apply for any, I don't know why. The board motion is the committee moves that the board authorizes payment to applying school districts pursuant to 53F-2-3048 and 53G6-6-3053A and R277421.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board authorize payment to applying school districts pursuant to 53F-2-3048, 53G-6-3053A, and R277-421. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, you are quick enough. Board Member Lear.
Just simple, I will recuse myself from this vote because I represent South Summit and Box Elder.
Okay, that's noted, thank you. Any other discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes and we have Board Member Lear's. Okay.
Okay, 13.6, minimum school program balance transfers. Every year, the board has the authority through statute to move available monies from the kindergarten and grades 1K through 12 program to the voted and board levy program to fund balances if the appropriation is not adequate enough to fund these. In FY 2019 has a deficit of $6 billion, is that right? $977,947 dollars and 92 cents, and staff are requesting authority to transfer $6 billion,
million.
$9 million. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. I keep saying billion. I just work in billions. $6,977,947.92 from the K-12 down to the VPLN to fund these payments. The committee I don't have the motion here. Yes, I do. The committee moves that the board approve the MSP program transfer balance of $6,977,947.92 from the K-12 down to the VBLP.
That's a voted board leeway. Yeah.
I know.
VBLP.
Voted and board levied programs for FY 2019.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve the MSP program transfer balance of $6,977,947.92 from K-12 down to the voted board leeway program for fiscal year 2019. Okay. Not seeing any discussion, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Now we can just work in millions. On 13.8, the statewide longitudinal data system, SLDS, grant application. The USB has successfully received 3 grant awards through the SLDS grant process since 2007. This 4th grant request is for $3.5 million over a 4-year period to do research on points of interest from the SSID, whole health of the Utah students, and increase research capacity for the state. The motion from the committee is that the board approves the SLDS grant application.
Okay, before I state the motion, I just want to remind, this is to approve the application, not the contract or anything outside of that, okay? It's just to do the application. Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve the statewide longitudinal data system grant application. Discussion to the motion, Board Member Earl.
Yes. How much have we acquired or applied for and received since 2007? What's the amount Utah's received? How many millions? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I have that information, but I can get it to you. I can follow up with that.
So we're talking millions,
We're
right?
talking
I mean, the
millions.
initial one was a huge.
Right.
this is big.
Yeah. So, and then when we start the memo in here, which I know a couple years ago, we moved down to workforce services, the whole thing from the Utah Data Alliance. And just to start out, the USBE SSID system has been plagued by issues for numerous years. Am I reading this right? Am I not on the right one? I am, right? It's the, yeah, under the recommendations section. So I have concerns. First of all, I have concerns over extensive data collection of the families in the state of Utah. I think we're excessive. We need enough to run things, but we don't need to anyways. But beyond that, the system, when they moved everything down, that's because things weren't working right. We've spent millions and millions already. I was in the legislative meeting they had with Senator, oh goodness, now.
Andrick.
What's that?
Andrick.
No.
Okay.
There's a gas.
Yeah, good
Wrong.
guess though. But the point was, is the concern that we've put this millions in here, and we're supposed to have these incredible outcomes, and yet then we moved all the system down. We moved it out of education completely. We moved it to workforce services, and now we're asking for more monies. And in this case, I believe it's preschool, right? Which really in our state now is defined as birth to 5. Am I accurate in saying that?
Okay,
Yes. Okay.
0 to 5.
So, and then we're talking about the whole child approach. And stating in that same area where I'm reading here, it says, often the community or school or family's response to a student's well-being is often reactionary. We have the opportunity to work. So the we here is going to solve whatever the problem is because we've got local entities are reactionary. And so, but then we go down, we go down a little further, and we're talking about early warning systems. We're talking about what is it that we're doing with this money? What is it that we're doing? And I know we're applying for the grant. We're hoping to get it. It's a competitive grant, so of course we're going to write that really. So we're going to tell them we're going to do extra data collecting so we can get the funding. I'm concerned we're going in the wrong direction for families. I know that doesn't make sense to data people.
Okay,
So-
I'm just trying to get the question. The
Okay.
question is, what do we do with what are we doing with the money, and what was the other piece?
Yeah.
So I
How
think they're
much?
ready to respond, and then you
I-
can do a follow-up if you have more. I'm just trying to get direct.
Let's do that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so we just want to answer the first question. So total over the time period to your first question is what, about 26 million?
26 million.
26
Okay,
million.
26 million, okay. Now, Albert can, real quickly, I know time can go ahead and tell what the basic spend plan is for the 3.5 million. Share that with them now, please.
I'm planning, well, I use I because right now it's still in the draft stage. I have not met with all the other partner agencies from Department of Health, Workforce Services, USHE, UTAC, or UEPC. And so the partners, we're going to plan basically sometime in August. But right now I'm drafting, my initial plan is to place one researcher in each of the different agencies. We have made all the connections so far. And there are more connections coming in from Department of Health, Birth and Death Registry, and we're going to have more than that, or hopefully, working with Department of Health. And with these connections, we're going to, as I said, whole health is not just, it's an entire community. And as use we as in the whole community, the school community, the state, and everybody else. Utah, for the age group of 10 to age 24, we are suicide is the number 1 cause of death. And in the nation, Utah is ranked number 4th and 6th, depending on age group, for suicides. And that's not something we should be proud of. So we are working towards getting this whole health, getting everybody's involvement. The Department of Health data coming to us would provide I would call it early warning system. Not that we're going to go there and we're going to try to support families and individuals, because there are lots of individuals who are depressed or suffer from bipolar or whatever kind of situation they may find themselves in that needs help. And that's what we are trying to do. So with one FTE in each of the 5 agencies, I call it, it increased the research capacity. Our staff here, basically, I'm the only one who can perform research, but I have to do wear a lot of other hats. I'm the project director for the grant. I meet with Department of Health, Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, and I'm the liaison basically for everything. And I don't have time to sit down and work with researchers. And so during our recent visit 1.5 months ago by the U.S. Department of Education, where most of our folks were up in the interim education committee meeting, they cited that we need to increase our research capacity. We have the data now. Now we need people to be able to look at those data so that you folks will be able to make better policies based on data-driven, not based on anecdotal history or whatsoever. And so that's what we are trying to do.
Superintendent Jones, you wanted to...
Okay, so just to clarify, Chair Huntsman, I think earlier to your point, the purpose of this agenda item is to approval to move forward with the application. If we do the application, we'll bring this back to the board and have the details of the spend plan as Albert Tay has articulated. So you still have another opportunity to, we don't have to accept the grant if the board doesn't want to accept the grant. We're just asking for permission at this point to move forward with the application. Is that, that's what we're understanding now. So. But the details are important. We would bring those
They are
back to you.
important
Yep,
because
absolutely.
it is a data collecting entity making decisions. I feel like we're making them further away from families. We're gathering the data when kids and families go to physicians and other places. We're putting that together. We're making decisions for them and saying, we've got a great idea for you guys.
Right.
So-
I just think the closer we are to homes, I'm concerned that we're inventorying our families. So.
And a lot of the concerns are there. However, in an effort to be fully transparent and a fully informed board and time and schedules of different things, it comes quite often, the grant application, do we or don't we?
Right.
And then we work out the details in the next round, whether we accept or not. So this is, more of this will just keep coming, but this is strictly the grant
Applications.
Just the application, right.
Which,
And if I may, the point's well taken, and so this is also the reason why we had the SEDS piece to it too, because we do recognize, and it goes to that point, is how much data do we really need? How deep do we need to go? And we feel that that'll all tie into all of this process that we're doing, so that board members have the opportunity to determine, okay, if we go ahead and accept the grant, then exactly what will that mean? You know, what does that mean? And with the standards that we're setting, you still have the authority to say, you don't need to seek that element, or you don't need to do that element. That should occur as part of this process as well.
okay. Board Member Bolter?
Thank you. In looking at I don't know what document this is, going back, but where Board Member Earl was reading, going down, so my understanding for this is to collect this information so that it says here, this is similar to early warning systems. However, instead of preempting an individual's poor performance with proper intervention, the information received will preempt the community of potential health issues with an individual. So is that the thinking that with this data, we'll be able to say child A has the potential for this health issue, and then you can prepare for it, or whatever, not necessarily just health, but any issue. So, so my concern is that I feel like we're running diagnostics on a child as we would a computer system. And we're trying to predict outcomes. And we're forgetting that these are children that their course is not set. I mean, we may predict something, but they have the ability to change. And so I'm really hesitant when we try to predict outcomes of any human being. I'm just kind of hesitant about that. But I understand. I mean, it sounds good. Let's put it that way. It sounds good, but I keep having warning signs in my brain come
Chair,
up.
if I may respond. The data that we're getting from Department of Health, basically, I'm not sure what kind of data. We are in the discussion process right now. And there are different data sets I can get. I can get prescription data, but that is no good. In my opinion, it's no good in terms of research because I'm too late in the game. But if somebody is diagnosed with, let's say, bipolar and does not seek any prescription, he's going to fall through the cracks, he or she, that individual. And so with prescription, there are certain ways that it says, but with a diagnostic data, and that's what I'm looking for, it gives us warning, an idea of, hey, this person might be susceptible. Not that so we're going to look out for it. So it's more a lookout or early warning, and we can help the individual if things like that. I work in Pennsylvania. I told the superintendent this a month and a half ago when I worked in Pennsylvania at one of the universities. I met one of these young men who tried to kill himself 6 times. And during the 3 years that I was there, 4 years basically, he tried to kill himself 2 more times. That is something that's not acceptable to me. An individual is precious to me. And so that's why we're looking at this. Every Utah student is precious to us. And so as we as in the school community, and that is all of us. And it's not just K-12, it's going to look at even the universities, because this is where USHE and UTEC will come in. And so that's my thought that is my thoughts. And in terms of whether we will actually pursue that, I don't know, because I have to write out the whole thing and
Well, we're getting down into the weeds of all of the
Right.
performance that happens in here, and that's not what's before the board. So if I can bring us back to where we're at. Where we're at is the application for this funding, similar to what we've had in the past. It's not a vote to continue the course. It's, do we get in line? Do we get our application in? And then work up these integral details on the operational side and any strings that are attached to the final grant application. Board Member Bolter?
Thank you for that. And I just have to say that it is actually really important that we do get into the weeds a bit to decide if we want to go this route, because this is a discussion. If we're going to decide whether or not to go for this, then we should say what is the outcome, and we should have the discussion about this. Exactly. And I'll be voting no against this, not because I don't care about the child. I do, but I just worry about how much data we are collecting and what we're trying to do with it. I understand data is gold. I mean, right now, it is worth a lot of money, but we have to be really careful.
You know, I've interjected a few times today. I've just got to jump in again. There was a famous person many years ago, back in the days of the plague, and this individual, she was a she, fixed the problem with 2 things, and it wasn't even known at that time. One was gathering data. The second was GIS. Do you think GIS goes back to the plague days of what was going on? I'm not saying that we have a plague here, but we do have some concerns. But the challenge here is, as we're getting into where Board Member Bolter is talking about, is how much data is too much data and what data is at risk, and as long as we have great data policemen and processes and board members that are concerned about it, I'm speaking in favor of this particular application to continue it on, because I am not sure exactly. There is not a guaranteed ROI on this of how many lives could be saved, or somebody's career, or some intervention, or tie to additional funding for more of this. less of that. I'll go back to this. I can remember when, I can't remember, but I remember the stories of lunch in schools, and it was like, what the heck are you talking about, and how relevant they were. So there ended up being some form of intervention to make sure people were fed so that they could be educated. I see another crisis before us now. It's not on the horizon, it's here today, and that's how do we keep our kids mentally healthy and alive, and a few other things. And as long as we have safeguards in place and people asking these really important questions, I'm in favor of moving on this application. But I'm not in favor of approving the grant until we see what's in the details. Board Member Jenny Earl.
Once again, we're collecting sensitive data. I mean, this is probably medical information. I'm not saying the school's doing that, but together, the whole group is. And we may be able to control elements of that. We may be able to say, well, this is the only things we want going out. But at the same time, everyone else is contributing what they want to. And it's been my experience from our previous meetings that when individual families, especially those at risk, sign up for certain programs, they have a tendency to lose their voice, meaning that they no longer, if you want the program, you don't have a say. As much as we think we can opt out of things, or we can say, I don't want my data used, the option's no longer there, especially for preschool, anyone birth to 5, because we no longer allow that to take place. That's just part, if you're going to be in the program, then there's certain things that you give up. And then and we know this, we do have safeguards and all that kind of stuff, but in the day we live, the FBI last year, and I'm sure you guys have probably seen it, put out just a public awareness about cyber threats with school, not just school, but tech data, as well as any of those things, and just saying we need to just be aware of the sensitivity of that data, and if it's, collected and used in certain ways, cyber security is a huge issue. And I have no doubt we're putting together systems that will be strong, but at the same time, we've got to be aware of the amount of data and what we're using it for and who's using it for what. So I think we do have to have that conversation.
Board Member Hanson, Linda Hanson.
I call previous question.
Okay, we're going to end debate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? How many noes? One. So the motion to end debate. Oh, so the motion passes unanimously. Okay, we've ended debate. The motion before the board is that the board approve the here we are. The board approved the SLDS grant application. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Do we have, with a no? I think we have 2. Okay, motion passes. Chair Belknap, will you please continue?
Oh, yeah.
You're almost there.
No, we're on school fees, we're not there. Okay. So 13.9, R277407 school fees amendment. I'm not going to go through each of these amendments, but we're talking about draft 3. So the motion 4, sorry, I apologize. The committee moves that the board approve R277-407 draft 4 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-407 draft 4 on second and final reading. You're going to speak to not going to speak to the motion. Discussion to the motion. Board Member Davis.
I have 3 amendments to the motion. Shall I go through each of those?
Do we have them in advance or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They're on Civic Clerk.
They have minor changes to them, but yeah, they're on.
Okay.
They're on the computer.
So let's do. How many total amendments do we have? You have 3. Do you have 1? 4. Okay, we have a question. Okay, question. Okay, let's just do one amendment at a time.
Okay. The first one is just a logistical amendment.
So do we have it up on here?
Trying.
I'll start talking while she's trying.
Okay.
It should be in your screen. I originally wanted to strike this line because it's confusing
We
and
don't know which line. Will
potentially
you refer and
misleading.
know it as we're bringing it
Lines 212 to 213, because it's inconsistent with lines 195 and 197. But instead of striking, I move that lines 212 to 213 read, in project-related courses, projects required for course completion shall be included in the class fee. Because what's happening now with the verbiage is, in lines 195 and 197, it says that you can charge class fees for these classes, but later in the rule, it says additional projects have to be paid separately, but the projects that are included in the grade have to be included with the fee. But instead it says, in project-related courses, projects required for course completion shall be free to all students. So if I'm understanding what I'm reading in the rule, and as I've talked to our folks here, that implies a project-based class is going to be free, but that's not necessarily what the rule says later. Does that make sense?
So does that language
Okay.
look right?
Did you want to speak to that, Angie?
Oh.
So before we do, we have a proposed amendment. Is there a second? Second. Okay. So we have one on the table now. So did you want to speak to, I thought she asked a question.
Yes, I think it was rhetorical, sort of. But yes, I agree that the language that you just proposed would be appropriate if that was the question. And I just wanted to make sure that what I wrote there is what you were hoping. In project-related courses, comma, projects required for course completion shall be included in the course fee.
That's more consistent with what you have later in the rule.
So we would delete what's currently in 5A and
Wait,
just.
sorry, can I say a follow-up? We actually need to clarify that because it's only the projects required for the grade. Because later in the rule, you have explained how those additional optional projects will be dealt with. Mhm. So we need to delineate that somehow. Is that what you were going to say too?
Superintendent, then I'll,
I just would indicate that since we have districts that are moving away from grades, so you might want to think about how do you make this
Course
rule more.
requirement or something.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be more general. Not everybody's getting grades. The course completion makes more sense. I mean, it's more aligned with competency-based and
That's
some
fine.
of those pieces versus a grade.
Yeah, agreed.
Is that good? I think that's good. Is that okay?
okay. Board Member Belknap?
I'm sorry, because I can't get in queue, but I guess my question is, just to be very careful here, that a course could be completed or grade, could be completed in one way, but someone might want to do it slightly different, but it's supplied here, and this would be extra. The birdhouse versus the chest of drawers, okay? So I want to be really careful that for our kids who are just happy to have exactly the birdhouse, that's what they get.
Can I follow up? I
Yes.
do think that is made clear in later lines.
Yes.
In the board rule.
that's
It
what I
talks about
thought.
the additional projects.
In another place.
Okay.
Okay. Any other, Board Member Lear, you have okay. But people are in the queue. Anyone else, just raise your hand if you have and then we'll turn to this proposed. Okay. So the proposed amendment is to strike the existing 5A and replace with
Okay,
this
I got it.
5A that states in project-related courses, projects required for a grade or for course completion shall be excluded in the course fee. Okay. Is there any more discussion to this proposed amendment? Seeing none. Oh, Board Member Bolter? You waiting for what? Oh, I thought I had it on. I thought I clicked it.
I'm just trying to make sure that to Board Member Belknap's point, rewording it this way, it's still okay that if you want to go above and beyond what the birdhouse that's required, if you want, then.
Yes.
Then you can pay the extra. Okay, so that doesn't change that.
That doesn't
Okay.
change that. So, Chair?
Yes.
So all of what I've highlighted in the subsequent lines, so right now we're amending 212 and 213, but all of what's in 214 through 221, you can see it states that students may pay for additional discretionary courses, and the school can choose whether to charge for the armoire in lieu of the birdhouse. So, but it doesn't require them to charge for the additional project, but a school may.
Okay, any further discussion to the proposed amendment? Seeing none, let's vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Okay, your proposed amendment number 2, Board Member Davis.
I move that we delete lines 414 and 415, and I'd like to speak to the motion.
Okay, do we have just
Sorry.
delete, period?
Mhm.
Not replace? Do we have a second? Second, Board Member Lear, speak to the motion, please.
Okay. The intent of this is to give like a reminder that LEAs need to ensure that there aren't huge inequities between schools and their districts. And I'm just thinking that this is better taken care of in Utah Administrative Code Rule 277-113 in the LEA fiscal and auditing policies. This would be a better place to adjust that language, because this language is coming back from ideas in the 90s when we had 42 LEAs that had multiple schools. And now we've got 150, I don't know how many LEAs we have now. Over 150 LEAs, and some of our LEAs are one single school. So, for example, should an LEA that's one single school be able to take whatever company wants to donate to them, but a school that's within an LEA that has multiple schools has to say no because it could put that school over an advantage of another school within that LEA? The language needs to be more clear. Additionally, significant advantage, if we're going to leave that in there, that's got to be defined. What does that mean? For example, we had a school, Linden Elementary, in our LEA, and they got a huge $100,000 company donation. They made a garage, a tech garage. UEN has made a show about them so other schools could replicate if they can, and they're innovating. Should they have had to say no because it puts them at advantage over the 2 district schools and 1 charter school in their neighborhood? And we say we want to have more public-private partnerships. We want to have more of this, but this language really precludes that. It says only if it's under our terms. So if we're trying to send a message to LEAs to be careful, then we can put that in our it's already in our administrative code, and we can work on that language. But to have it here, first of all, it's unclear because significant advantage isn't defined, and second of all, it allows for single school LEAs to accept whatever they want and multiple school LEAs with multiple schools not to, and that doesn't seem okay.
Okay, we have the second amendment has been seconded. Anyone want to just? Okay. Board Member Hanson?
Let me give you another scenario from my experience in my district. We have issues where wealthy parents donate, let's just give an example, donate massive amounts of playground equipment to schools. So their kids have top-of-the-line playground equipment. On the other side of town, we have kids who don't have any playground equipment or old, broken playground equipment at their schools. And when asked, the district says, well, we don't have money to pay for playground equipment over here. And so you have this huge inequity. You have schools with wealthy patrons who have all of these things because their parents and others are willing to pay to have all of these nice things for kids, which is great. But on the other side, you have kids whose parents are just eking by and can't afford to pay for these things. And so then you have this huge inequity. And I've seen it happen, and it's very disheartening.
Okay. Sean, was you speaking to this one?
Yes.
Okay. And Board Member Lear, I just have you in the queue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Board
I
Member
want to
Newell.
mirror Board Member Hanson, and these creations of inequity carry over long beyond the years in school. And we have an opportunity to impact this in a positive way by not creating systems, or I should say, continuing to have these systems in place that create these separations in communities. And it's something that we have to be conscious of when we look at these opportunities. This has happened in the past with sports fields, for example. And it got to a point where people started to realize that, this is not right. It's not fair. So we began to put the AstroTurfs in most of the fields around the state, which created some equity amongst these athletes. We have to do the same thing with school equipment, with books, with everything else in our communities. Otherwise, it's going to carry on, be above and beyond just these years K through 12. And we have to be conscious of that.
Okay. Board Member, or Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
I think an LEA has the opportunity to receive large donations as an LEA and then to use those monies to upgrade things across the LEA. And I think it's the same for small LEAs as it is for large LEAs. And so I think it's just that a large LEA would need to bring in a lot more of those donations in order to do that across the board. But I think it's when it's school by school that within an LEA that causes the inequities, whereas an LEA, a large district, can receive large amounts of donations as an LEA and use that to create, improvements across their district.
Okay. Let me go to Scott, and then I'll go to you. Scott Hanson, Board Member Scott Hanson.
As I was reading this language, I was thinking about the Ogden High School restoration project, and I'm not sure how this would apply to that, but certainly there was $15-20 million in private funds that were applied to restore a historic building. If you look at that, it's beautiful. It has Art Deco auditorium, and that's certainly probably not equitable when you look at Ben Lomond High or some of those places. Nice building now. Ben Lomond's been renovated, but certainly not to the extent of that. And this language would probably prevent that, in my estimation. Is that a consequence of what we're doing?
Board Member Lear.
And I have more of just a question, because I have the same mixed feelings about this. What if it said something like, I think it's just almost absurd to put in a rule that a school can't accept a donation. Yeah. Whether it's, because there's so many squishy words in there too. So let me lead with that. But secondly, what about something that says, if an LEA accepts a donation, and I don't know, I think it almost has to be of a certain size. I was talking to my nieces and nephews about how much money they give the schools every year, their teachers every year at Christmas, which amounts to a significant donation in my mind. But it almost needs an amount there. But what if it said something like, if a school accepts a donation, it must notify the donor that the donation must be used equitably, or must be used, or may be used. Is there any way that we could at least notify the donor that that the school district has some control over how the money is used, or does that just mean that selfish people keep their money? I don't know, but that's just a thought I had, a different kind of language. Anybody want to?
Okay, Superintendent, I want to comment sometime in here, but I'll wait till everyone else is done. Superintendent Dixon.
Angie, if I'm, Deputy Stallings, if I'm recalling the conversation correctly, when this line was put in there, the examples were things like what Board Member Hanson addressed. It's things like playground equipment, air conditioners. That was something in a neighborhood close to me where a family tried to buy air conditioning for one of the schools in a wealthy neighborhood, and other schools in the same district were not air conditioned. And the district wisely said, no, that's not an appropriate donation because it would create an inequity. But I think framing the conversation, it was around sort of essential elements for students to have a well-rounded and a good education. You can't, the inequity comes in if you're trying to provide something for one school that another school can't afford to have, and you continue to see the inequity as Board Member Newell talked about. So can you provide that context? It seems like it was specific to things like air conditioning and playground equipment, and but I think this can also play into, you have a lot of booster clubs that I think are getting nervous about this kind of stuff. Well, wait a minute, we've always given $50,000 for new uniforms or whatever, so maybe that might be helpful, Chair Huntsman, for some context to that line.
And back being on that task force and within this discussion, we've talked, and I'm listening really well. By the way, I have really nice hearing devices that really work pretty good. And if you could hear what I hear, everyone's a little S, and superintendent's the best. It's lots of S's in there, and it's kind of makes me smile. So it's been kind of a smiley day for me. But back to this. Back on there, it says an LEA may not. It doesn't say a school may not. This goes back to our conversation. So it's given direction to the LEA that you can receive a donation. But what does it say in that line? It says you cannot use it to create this inequity. So it puts every LEA on notice, whether you have 20 schools or two schools, that you have to be thinking of the equity side of it. And it might be in the case of the playground equipment where somebody says, hey, I want to help with some playground equipment. Yeah, we'll accept your donation, but no, you don't get to specify exactly how it's
Well, then let's say
going to be spent at what school. And from the business community, if I was to represent the business community here a little bit, a lot of times the business community, and that's what I think has been a really good thing that's propped up public education in Utah. They want to do something. They're just not going to get to, the way I see it, they're not going to be able to specify exactly what it is. And so back to the context of why that was in there, it was, hey, if you're making a donation, you don't get to specify exactly what it is. And on the building side, there's some workarounds that can happen on making buildings and.
Talk to me about that. That money went through the foundation, which is usually.
Yeah, and not just an LEA donation to build.
Every school district has a foundation.
Yeah, and so that can still happen, but this is about.
That was earmarked money.
This is money that, private outside money, whether it's people or business or whatever, that says, yeah, we can take your money, but LEA, you're on notice. You can't show a prejudice or something specific. And so that was the intent, Superintendent, when we were having that conversation.
No.
Cindy, you wanted, Board Member Davis?
Oh, I mean, I agree with all of these comments, actually. You know, that you shouldn't have tons of playground equipment at one another. That is 100% I'm in agreement with. Is there a way to write that here? I mean, is there a way to clarify this more? Because I think we have some things already in place to mitigate that concern by our new board rule where we say LEAs now can use resource, if one school's getting a bunch of donations, LEAs now can use resources to offset that by giving those more equitably to someone else. Also, Angie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's new code that she said just recently that allows associations, even if a donor says it has to be for this one thing, it actually allows associations to spread that donation around. And again, she can correct me if I misunderstood what she said earlier. But I think there are some things in place to mitigate some of these concerns about equity, and maybe we could write it differently to do more if it's, you know, I think we can address it in Utah Administrative Code. But what's written right now in this board rule is nebulous. There's no definition of what a significant advantage is. And there's also, it's basically, you know, turning away free money, which I hate to do. Is there a way to keep it, but do it in a more equitable way?
Totally agree.
Okay. Board Member Scott Hansen?
Yeah, I'm just going to speak again in favor of the amendment number 2. Just because of unintended consequences. I think maybe we look at this and look at 277-113 and see if there's a way to address it. Particularly with the example that I spoke of. I mean, that Ogden High project was something the whole community got behind. It was something that was beautiful, but it's inequitable. Under the circumstances, it was the right thing to do. Alumni donated a lot of money. The place is beautiful. They're proud of it. It's become, you know, a really neat thing in the community. But this language would block that, I think.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further discussion. Board Member Lear.
I know we've got a scheduled discussion tomorrow. I know that LEAs, that we have these two like competing urgencies. We want to understand this and do the best job we can. We have a meeting to schedule tomorrow to discuss fees more fully and thoroughly, especially for the new board members. I think the group is in agreement about what we want to do. I think it's just off-putting to write it the way it's written. We don't want to tell schools we don't want money, but I absolutely think there should be a way to say it to say that the LEA has to have a reasonable degree of discretion in order to keep things equitable. Mark, your point about an LEA can't, but a school could, I think just opens the door to worse kinds of abuses. So I don't like that. So I would like to be able to think we can think about this overnight, and this is one of my reasons for not wanting to pass this rule today, but rather have an opportunity to discuss it tomorrow.
Then you shouldn't be able to have it.
Yeah, but we'd have to start it all over.
Okay.
So can we just put it on
No,
hold?
hang on.
What
Board Member
about-
Haynes?
Yeah, I don't want to draw this out any longer than it needs to be, but over the last 10, 11, 12 years, I've raised $10 to $15 million for the Jordan School District. And we decided through the foundation how to spend that. We would have donors say, we want to build a greenhouse at this school. And through our foundation that included a superintendent, as well as the board president, the LEA president, that money came through the foundation. Whenever the district was called and said, we want to provide money to the district, they rerouted that call through the foundation, which was the 501c3 that allowed for that kind of a contribution or donation. So is the foundations going to be part of the LEA specified here in this amendment? Would that
Want
be?
to answer that?
Yeah,
So the foundation can accept it and determine how that money is spent?
they're an extension, right?
Well, they don't donate it to the LEA.
Okay, hang on one sec.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Angie?
So these are really great questions, and I would say that the foundation is an extension of the district. And so just because the district creates this separate entity doesn't leave all of a sudden the equal protection, constitutional equal protection rights of students at the door. All of this language was just a simple way, and it could be improved. I understand that it may not be as clear, but the court order, and that's kind of what I had up there earlier, talked about the permanent injunction, didn't talk about specific examples of schoolyards or certain programs, but it stated exactly what Board Member Newell and Board Member Hanson stated, where there were examples of districts that had very huge disparities between 2 or 3 different schools in their district. The protections of students comes from the Constitution of equal protection of the law. And so even if a foundation, if they're being an extension of that district, they then also carry that fiduciary duty to every student. And I agree, I understand that the language in right here may be squishy, and part of that is it's very difficult to say, is it 100,000, is it when it's $1 million, when it reaches, so it is a nod to remind districts that of this constitutional duty to make sure that they're not, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same, because I think what Board Member Hanson is stating is obviously the Ogden High School facility is unique. It's a one of a kind. And there's no way you can replicate that. But maybe other money is used to do a magnet program at Ben Lomond or something else. And I think that's what the court was saying. It's not that everything has to be the same. You don't have to have the exact same donation, but you want to make sure that you don't have one school within the district repeatedly getting large donations. And that's exactly what the court order stated when it talks about this.
You gotta turn your light on. Is your light on?
Oh. So.
Board Member Lear.
And we can talk to Lacouscom Home about what that order meant, but we've ignored that order 3 or 4 times, and the legislature's ignored it another 2 or 3 times. I don't know that I just don't think it is sacred language anymore, if it ever was. So I'm not necessarily persuaded what the order meant or said, but I do think saying this in a way that captures both equity is required, but we're not telling you can't give us money, is crucial. And I think it's going to take, we've already been wrestling with it for 6 months. I think we need another 12 or 18 hours to say something that's closer to what we mean, because nobody's really comfortable, as I hear, nobody's really comfortable with that, but nobody's really comfortable with gross inequity either. And to the superintendent's point, I was in those task force meetings, and it wasn't just big equipment. It was also, the very best, newest football uniforms. It was also multiples of things that smaller, less wealthy schools could not afford.
Okay. Board Member Belknap.
Thank you. I was raising my hand, Linda, because I'm on mic already. So I'd like to call a question, please.
That's not fair.
Oh, sorry.
And I missed you several back, and I forgot because your light was on because you were chairing. So I think I'll turn your light off, and then you can get back in the queue in the future, so I apologize. Okay, we're calling to question. However.
Linda was in queue.
What's that? Linda, this is a big issue. Are you going to add more or something besides this? Or are you going to, before I call to question, Board Member Linda Hanson, did you have a question or
The comment.
Okay.
Having experienced it, it's demoralizing, it's difficult, it's hard on kids and schools and people to when these inequities occur. And I wish every school had large donors, but some just don't have any. I mean, they're in areas where they're not going to get any large donors. And so we've got to see what we can do to make it more equitable.
We have a motion to call to question. Are you going to, this is, and we're kind of repeating the same stuff, so is there something new come up for the board to help them make an informed decision? I'm going to give it one more shot, and then we're going to draw some hard lines here. We're not going to get through the day. Board Member Davis?
Is it possible to withdraw the motion and instead direct staff to work on language that could meet all of the needs that we've been discussing here?
Well, certain things are coming back up tomorrow, so you can withdraw and.
But we have to vote on this whole rule today.
I did try
Yeah.
to draft something that's a little
There's
different.
an amendment's going to come out of tomorrow.
That on the bottom, but
Okay, I'm going to do a call to question
He's
on
gonna-
this.
I move to postpone on the rule, whatever Scott just said.
Well,
Can I do that?
we have a call to question, so I'm going to start following this protocol more rigidly. We're ending debate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. The motion before the board is, I have so many notes that, oh, here we go. The motion before the board is that
To direct staff. But I didn't.
the board approve R277407 Draft 4 on second and final reading. Oh, no, it's at as amended.
one was voted on.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm right. Okay, so my notes I'm behind on my notes. Okay, so the motion is on the amendment number 2. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So the motion before the board is to delete on lines 414 to 415, number 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Will the ayes raise your hand? We have Board Member Davis, Board Member Scott Hansen, Board Member Earl, Board Member Marsh, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Cannon. That's 6.
Now we're gonna-
Okay. Motion does not pass. Your next amendment.
Okay. The next one is line, this is going to be open for discussion, but I move that it's not the one written in the screen. On line 53, in the definitions, I move that we delete the word mutual in line 53, and I'd like to speak to the motion.
Is there a second? Second, Board Member there, you would speak to the motion?
Yes. I'm going to speak to it in a question. I think that we are trying to, in a group fundraiser, avoid like biases and not giving an equal share to somebody. But are we also tying the hands of the educator to use discretion? Let's say, for example, there are 3 people that are on fee waivers and there's no money left to pay for the trip or the uniform or whatever. Are we tying their hands that they can't use that money to help pay for those 3 folks so the activity can move forward? Are we, in an effort to do one thing, are we tying their hands to do another thing? Is my question. And if we take out the word mutual, does that solve that problem?
Okay. Angie, can you guys want to speak to that? The word mutual, how relevant is that in here and with it out?
Okay. Okay. I can just tell you a bit about the background about why group fundraiser versus individual fundraiser was created. It was partially talking about the community service to offset fee waivers, and then also about the inability for certain students to meet quotas for individual fundraisers, meaning that you could have a student who comes from a more low-income neighborhood or family who has a hard time meeting a quota versus a wealthy one. So I just throw that out there. So the idea that my understanding was that the task force had is, let's, instead of everything being earned or done individually, or instead of just having students who qualify for fee waivers do service or fundraise, let's make this a group fundraiser that's a team building effort that then goes to benefit the entire team activity program. And so if you take out the word mutual, I think you still have a little bit of a question. If you do a group fundraiser, does it just go towards to offset all the costs of the team, regardless of whether the student participates or not? So I'm a little unsure about if deleting mutual absolutely solves the problem. That I think the question is, what if you have 20 teammates, only 17 come to the group fundraiser? Could we just spread that money amongst the 17 instead of all 20? And so if you delete mutual, that sends a message that I guess it's up in the air, maybe? I don't know if I'm helping. I'm trying to answer, but I don't quite know the impact of what taking out mutual is, how much it's going to help or hurt.
Could that answer your question to a certain degree?
It just seems like it will help everyone, but it'll hurt the ones who need it the most potentially. And I had written in my other language to add after line 17, may allow the school to distribute money earned from a group fundraiser to those students who participated in the group fundraiser. But quite frankly, I don't even think we need to add that in, because we've already talked about the disbursement in the definition. But I'm wondering if the word mutual implies that you have to, if you have 50 kids, you have to give all 50 kids $10, or if you could give 2 kids who really need it $250 so they can participate in the activity. I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what mutual means. Does it mean you have to, the teacher's hands are tied, they have no discretion?
Well, am I in, and I could be wrong, but if I heard you right, it's like, can I have a fundraiser and then decide that I can use certain funds from that fundraiser to assist those that are paying fee waivers somewhere else? And I don't think that was the whole intent of having a fundraiser, is a group fundraiser, not for the purpose of raising funds for someone else. It's to raise it for the whole group. Now, Board Member Lear, I hope you're going to be okay over there. Here you go.
Which, I don't even know how to, this is another one that I'm really conflicted about, that I think we need to, my druthers would be to back off and let teams try to do this and groups try to do this and see how it works, because I relayed to a couple of you, several of you, my experience when my kids were playing soccer at East. They had a group fundraiser that the coach required within the thread of their lives they had to come to. And then the coach, and I don't know if he discussed this with them before or not, but the coach first paid for the fee waiver eligible kids, and then he made the money available for the team. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. And I still don't see anything wrong with that. And I read mutual benefit that way, that I don't think that it has to benefit every single student to be a mutual benefit to the group. And I guess my druthers would be to say where the money raised is used to benefit the group, team, or organization. And then it gives even more discretion, because in some schools you're going to have a lot of fee waiver eligible kids who needed a heck of a lot more than those other kids. In some schools you're going to have very few. And I think we need to leave that to the local decision making myself.
Board Member Bolter?
I was going to say essentially the same thing that Board Member Lear was going to say, that I would consider mutual benefit if my son's soccer team, they do fundraisers and the goalie can't pay his fees, it would be mutually beneficial for our team to get that fee covered, and I would be okay with that being used and then the rest, because we sort of kind of need that goalie. So I read that as mutual, like it would still benefit the team, the group, the organization, to have it that way, to make sure that we've got the players able to play and covered, and then spread it out. So I agree with Board Member Lear, like, let's let the districts figure this out instead of really just trying to, I don't know, continue to dictate in the rules and keep making more and more rules. Let's let them figure it out with the coaches.
Okay. Before I go to Cindy, is there, Laura, are you trying to get in line on this still? Okay, just, okay. Board Member Davis.
Just a heads up, I asked 3 people how they define mutual when they read that in the context, and they all 3 said equal. So it doesn't seem to, it seems to indicate that you are tying your teacher's hands. You can't, equal doesn't always mean equitable, so I just think we need to consider that with the word mutual. And it still would mean the same thing if you take it out. I mean, the things that you were saying.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further discussion, so the motion on the table is the amendment number 3 to strike the word mutual. Let's take that to a vote. All in favor, that's to take the word mutual out, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, that's 3. We still have Board Member, oh, you have more than 3? I'm going to go to Sean. Sean, you're up. You're going to have a chance there. I thought I was keeping score here. Board Member Newell, do you have a proposed amendment?
Yes, I have a proposed amendment for R277-407-9, and I would like to eliminate the word community before service throughout section R2277-409 of draft 4. And may I speak to that?
Yes.
Second that.
Oh, we do have a second.
Okay, we have a second.
Second.
Yes, may I speak to it? The word community, the phrase community service has a different connotation depending on the community in which you're addressing. I have no problem with service, and I came up with another word, an act of service for students to participate. I think it's critical that they do their part to raise these funds, but using community service, I think, would be detrimental to a number of students and the way that they perceive that phrase in their communities.
Okay. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, the proposed, the motion before the board on Newell's amendment is to take out the word community. Is that correct? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Vote is unanimous. Okay. So, Board Member Davis, this is proposed amendment number 4? Okay.
Don't promise.
I promise.
Board Member Davis.
I move that we direct staff to revisit lines 212 and 213 to not disadvantage LEAs with more than one school. Or, yeah. So send the message of equity, but not disadvantage LEAs with more than one school. Did I get the lines wrong? 212 and 213. Yeah, sorry, you're right, 414 and 415.
Did you get that? Yeah. Okay, Ms. Lorraine's going to state your proposed amendment.
I hope I worded that right.
Okay, the motion.
Hold on, do we have a hang on.
It's actually.
This isn't really an
No,
amendment.
no, this isn't.
It's not an amendment.
This isn't an
It's not
amendment.
amendment. Can I rephrase it also?
What's that?
Can I rephrase it?
well,
My motion,
no, well, you're,
just phrase it differently. It's a request.
well, what we're doing is amending and addressing the motion that came out of finance. So if you're given direction.
Oh, okay, it's just a
Can we-
request.
Can we save the direction until after the motion's done? Are you okay with that?
If it's just a request, I need to withdraw the motion, correct?
Okay, yes. Thank you.
So I withdraw the motion.
So we've got that withdrawn until we get to end. So, Board Member Scott Hansen,
I make a motion to postpone until after the discussion at the committee tomorrow and address this in our next board meeting.
we have a motion to postpone. Don't we? Isn't there a certain percentage pass on?
Just pass it and then bring this piece back.
I didn't bring my cheat sheet. Okay, we have a motion to postpone. My question that I'm having is how many votes does it take? I'm trying to remember if this is the one that has a, just regular, it doesn't have any limitations. And it is debatable. Okay. Did you want to speak to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my understanding is this is going to come before committee tomorrow, and we anticipate there'll be more changes to the rule. And I think that we
Okay.
should deal with those all at one time.
All right.
It's a study
All right.
Oh,
Discussion
study
to
I'm
the
sorry,
motion.
Study session tomorrow. It's on the
Okay.
agenda on the study session tomorrow.
Okay. Did we have, oh, I thought I heard a second. Do we have a second on the postpone?
Yes, second.
Board Member Lear, can you speak? They spoke to the motion. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Just the question is tomorrow's item, is it an action item tomorrow, or is it an informational item only? I was going to look it up and I couldn't find it. So it's just informational, there's no action tomorrow? And so I guess the question is what is the, are there any timing implications if we do not pass a version of this rule now? Would it be better to pass this rule today and then bring back some amendments if we find that to be
Okay, this
necessary?
is a question for Angie. Okay.
Chair, thank you, Chair. And I think Board Member Belknap was also going to speak to it, but I was with the Superintendent's Association the last 2 days, and actually we spent almost 3 hours on draft 4. And I don't want to speak for them, and Terry can either nod or say amen. But the superintendents were very appreciative of draft 4 and wanted it to be passed as soon as possible. It will, if we wait, it just means they have to wait to start working on these policies with their boards. But we could do a hybrid, which is you could pass this as amended today, and then we could bring the rule back when we are ready. For example, we have spend plan policies we're going to have to look at. So that is another option.
Okay, we have a motion we're speaking to the motion to postpone. Board Member Lear?
Here's another option, though. And the AAGs can speak to this too, but you can add an item to the agenda with as much notice as is reasonably practicable. So you could make this an action item as an emergency item because we couldn't reach consensus. What do you think?
Okay,
They said they'd need to do some research before they could answer that question.
Could we hear from Terry?
I think
okay,
we should
one sec.
move forward. Let's move forward.
I can't.
Angie just said what he said.
Okay, so our AG's going to weigh in on this, or Angie, are you?
I will just tell you that they both feel, and I actually probably agree, this doesn't constitute an emergency. Generally, emergencies are like safety or, so.
Okay. All right, Board Member Linda Hansen.
I just wondered if we could hear from Terry's perspective since he was on his way up
On draft 4?
on draft 4 and he had
They need it.
input. She asked for input from the superintendent.
Okay, Terry, you want to come up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry Shoemaker with the Utah School Board Association. Utah School Superintendents Association. Two things. First thing, we want you to know we were very, very grateful for the time that Angie and Scott spent with us on these issues yesterday and the day before. That's the first thing I wanted to tell you. It was significant information and sharing, and it was around this draft 4. So we spent some time talking and gaining some consensus, not some, consensus around draft 4. So there's been some suggestions about some changes, some of which are more minor than others. But right now we're talking about draft 4 for the most part. I'm urging you, and as I was coming up, I think other LEAs feel the same way, to pass a school fees rule as soon as possible, tonight if you can, because we are anxious and ready to use the guidance we've received to develop the policies that we need to develop in our school districts, to further do the things that we are already practicing right now in preparation for the full implementation of these school fees rules and law as we move down the road for the next year. So that's the input I want to give you. I'm urging you to vote on this tonight.
Okay. You're invited up. Thank you for your contribution. Board Member Hanson, Linda Hanson. We're talking to the motion to postpone.
I just wanted to say that I think after, this has taken years to do, right? And so, years because 20 years we put it aside. And so I think we will have to tweak it in the future as well. So I don't think we're done with it in any case. We'll be back and we can add more amendments. So I would urge that we just pass it.
Board Member Davis.
I am going to speak against the motion so we can move forward so our LEAs can get going with what they need to do. And in my last Finance Committee meeting that I attended, I want to thank our Finance Committee because I feel like they were listening to our boots on the ground and trying to address some of their concerns, and I really appreciated that. And I think enough of that has been done that we can move forward. And I'll just save my request. If this goes through today and it goes through administrative rules and all of that, maybe it comes back in a year and then we can look at, I think this line is problematic and has unintended consequences, but I'll do it in a year or whenever we can.
Okay, we have the motion on the table is to postpone. I'm not seeing any other discussion.
If it fails, are we point of order, point of question, point of something?
Well, no, we're back.
I want to still raise my questions if, I don't want it to go away entirely. If it passes, I mean, I think we need to do some clarification in other places.
Okay, again, what's on the table is the motion to postpone, period. That's what we're voting on. Okay. All in favor to have the motion, or to have this item postponed, say aye. Those opposed? No. Will the ayes raise their hand? Okay, you got that? Okay. So let me just remind the board what's on the table, and that is, we don't have any, all of our proposed amendments are behind us, so what we have is the board approve R277-407 draft 4 on second and final reading as amended. Going to get ready to vote on that unless something changes here. Board Member Lear.
I had some questions about the section, the supplemental kindergarten addition. So let me just ask them, and then maybe you could just respond generally. First of all, it doesn't seem to be, well, let me start with this. I think there's a significant question, and I asked for it to be researched. I don't know if the AAGs have had time to do this, but I think it's a good question if a supplemental kindergarten is integrated into the elementary school, does the free still apply to the elementary school program? So I'm even questioning the constitutional basis of being able to to charge for supplemental kindergarten, if it's become the standard to have whatever kind of kindergarten the LEA wants. So I think have that basic question. If there even could be a charge, not even subject to fee waiver. And I don't know that there's going to be any case law on that, so maybe it's easy research.
I think I
Second
am.
question, supplemental kindergarten seems to be able to expand or contract to anything an LEA wants to have that involves kindergarten students. There's nothing in here that says it could only be kindergarten students. It could be kindergarten students and other students, for students in kindergarten, but doesn't say only kindergarten. And so any students, if it had like 2/3 kindergartners and 4 first graders, is it still the same kind of a okay program, but subject to fee waiver? That's one question.
So that's two questions so far.
Well, two questions, sorry, I couldn't
So
count
are the
well.
AGs, are you guys, and everyone
AGs
tracking
about
this?
Is it constitutional?
We're talking about supplemental.
Okay, I can take a stab at the answer.
Okay, before we get too many questions
And
out there,
one
board
more-
member.
Just let me ask a third one and then let you just kind of respond yet. There's no hourly limitation on this. If they do 2 hours, but they call it supplemental kindergarten, and is it still okay? If they do 4 hours, is it supplemental kindergarten? If it's 3-year-olds and they call it supplemental kindergarten, is that okay? So I think that's the gist of my questions.
I think I got 1 and 3, and I'm trying to remember number 2 right now, but you'll help me.
Well, you got the gist of it.
I got the gist of it. So I think, and I apologize because I was writing down another amendment while I was half listening, but I do believe that you asked whether or not it's even constitutional or allowable to have a supplemental kindergarten that you charge a fee for.
Because it's
And
an
I think.
elementary program.
Yes, and I think that is a legal question that has yet to be tested in the courts. And I think as an attorney, I could argue both ways. And I know that, for example, Canyon School District is one, because I'm a Canyon School District resident. I know they offer supplemental kindergarten. And so obviously their legal counsel has researched this and determined that they believe because regular school day is defined in our 27749. Oh, I must have paused. I apologize. School day in this rule, and actually in 419 Section 2, is defined for kindergarten. And in kindergarten, it has to be, I think, at least 2 hours or 1.5, somebody, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Thank you. And for other grades, it has to be 4 hours or more. And so because school day has been defined as 2.5 hours, I think that, and what I was trying to get at here in supplemental kindergarten definition is as long as the LEA's standard regular school day for kindergarten is 2.5 hours or 3 hours or less, and they want to then say that's our regular school day, and then they decide to make available, almost like an after-school program or something else that's outside the regular school day, this supplemental kindergarten, then I think they can. But I could also, if I wanted to play the other side, make an argument that, well, that's not free, However, so in districts where they've already decided to do all-day kindergarten as their standard day, they may not charge a fee. It's only in those districts where their standard kindergarten day is that half day, and then they've decided to offer the second half of the day. However, it is subject to fee waiver. Remember that. Although they can charge a fee because it's outside of the regular school day, they still have to waive those fees for those students who qualify. So I think I can't give you a definitive decision, and both the AAGs agree with me that the case law, that this question has not gone to the courts yet. And so unless and until somebody gets sued or somebody asks for that decision to be made definitively, I think you just have two sides, and we have to wait and see.
So I just think we should address it rather than just say, until we get sued, this is okay, but okay.
But I think that's what we're addressing it. In some ways, the board is somewhat supporting the Canyons District
No.
approach by recognizing that supplemental kindergarten exists and that, as it states later on in the rule, that an LEA may have a supplemental or charge a fee for supplemental kindergarten.
Okay, what about the other question? Let's just.
Okay, then the school day one was one of yours, and so that is defined in 419, and the rule directs to it. So school day has been defined.
So, outside the regular school day, but how long does kindergarten?
2.5 more.
Kindergarten isn't defined.
2.5 hours. You're right, supplemental, we are defining it.
Oh.
And so if that's not the appropriate definition, we absolutely could tweak it or change it right now.
I just think, I think if it's fair game, we ought to just open it up and say it's however long you want it to be.
And I tried to make it vague so that they at least have to establish by policy what their regular school day is for all of their kindergarten programs. And then if that is less than, and they want to charge something outside, it's instruction, their hours beyond that, and then they charge a fee.
And to have it be full-day kindergarten, can I just ask in spirit of discussion, what about a curriculum? What if it's just daycare? There's no curriculum requirement?
So I think you bring up another question. So we've had this question about after-school programs, daycare, et cetera. Well, after-school programs and daycare are not universally run by LEAs. Sometimes third-party providers, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, they will come on to the premises, but they're actually run by a third-party provider. So we did not touch after-school or daycare programs in the rule because they could be a third-party provider providing them, or they could be an LEA. If the LEA or the school is providing an after-school or a daycare program, meaning they're paying their staff to run that program, then it's a school-sponsored activity outside of the regular school day. They could charge a fee, but it would be subject to fee waiver. If they've done a third-party arm's length transaction where YMCA is paying rental space or something, then the fees could be charged and you don't have to waive them. We have yet to find a supplemental kindergarten program that is provided by a third party. They generally are provided by the school, meaning it's not that they're contracting out for the supplemental kindergarten.
They're out there.
Anyway.
What about the idea of other kids, but rather than kindergarten, participating?
Well, and so if you think that there's something that could be clarified, I'd be happy to do that. It does say means an LEA program for students in kindergarten.
Only kindergarten age is, I guess, what I would add.
Okay.
So that it's clear that if you, it would limit the daycare notion of it anyway.
Should we change 167 to beyond the LEA's regular school day for kindergarten age students for an additional fee? We could add aged right there, or on 67.
Vice Chair Britton. I don't want to rant. I've said.
Or maybe we just need to leave it, maybe we just leave it and let them
Vice Chair Brittany Cummings, did you have?
game the system.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummings, did you have a comment on where that could be added?
I don't have a comment on where it be added. I think it's pretty clear the way it is. If we start putting in aged, it has students, parents who wait a year to put their child into kindergarten. I mean, I think there's just way too many fuzzy things we're getting into, and I think it's fairly clear the way it's stated, so.
I think it just allows for gaming the system, which is fine with me. So, the way it is, if they want to. Which is fine, I know there are students, I'm fine about not putting age in there. I just wanted to clarify what people thought it meant.
Okay. Okay, we're moving on.
Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I don't have any, I just think it's very squishy, and believe me, in talking to LAs, I'm gonna tell them, hey, lots of wiggle room in this.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
Yes, I want to make a motion for lines, since we're going to finish this up tonight, 414, 415, to change it to
help me if I don't get this right, or why we have it up there. If an LEA accepts a donation, the LEA shall consider potential inequalities on schools within an LEA when distributing large donations. Something like, because it kind of, there's a little bit of a balance there.
Okay, we have a proposed motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Board Member Marsh. Did you want to speak? You
Just
already
trying to
did, kind
create
of.
wording in a positive direction and still creating that balance there and just drawing attention to LEAs is all. So beware of this, so.
Okay, so we have the motion. Now we're going to go through people speaking to the motion. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
So when I think of a board rule, I think of something that is auditable, right? How would you show proof that you considered inequities? Are we requiring documentation of certain things? I guess it's just the question of when you put something in the term of a shall, you shall consider, what are we requiring an LEA to show as evidence of the consideration that they made in these possible inequities? And so I guess I'm just, what would that look like when we start making this rule?
Okay. Okay. Board Member Linda Hansen.
I'm not certain that this resolves the issue, just because an LEA could say they considered it and then they didn't care, or they decided not to do it. You know what I mean? It just, you know what I'm saying? LEA shall consider potential inequities. It just said, well, we considered it, but it didn't matter to us, so we didn't do it, so, yeah.
Board Member Lear.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. Board Member Davis.
I'd like to amend the amendment to read, if an LEA accepts a donation, the LEA shall prevent potential inequities on schools within the LEA when distributing large donations. And, you know, that's going to be up to them. If one school gets a big donation for their tech garage, then they're going to have to look at their resources and move those equitably towards other schools and things like that. But it does give more teeth to, they have to show some evidence of how they really, we're working toward an equitable situation.
Okay, we have a proposed amendment to the amendment. Is there a second? Second, and you already spoke to it to a certain degree. So we're going to speak to the proposed amendment to the amendment. Board Member Lear.
I have a question to the maker, Jenny. Would it be a good idea to say accepts a donation of more than $1,000? Or, I mean, does that add anything, do you think?
I personally think we leave it open. I don't think, because we're going to be, just depending on where it is, what location, rural, or, so that's what I think, so.
Okay, we have a proposed amendment to the amendment. Seeing no further discussion, let's vote on the proposed amendment to the amendment. What did we add again there?
It's just replacing.
Prevent.
Oh, replacing consider with prevent.
I think it's a stronger word.
Okay, we're going to vote on it, on the proposed amendment to the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, voting was unanimous. Now we're to the amended amendment. Any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Amendment to, the proposed amendment. Seeing none, let's vote. Is that how it's all? Is it?
Yeah, let me read what it says now, so we all know what it is.
Okay.
If an LEA accepts a large donation, the LEA shall prevent potential inequalities in schools within the LEA when distributing the large donation? Distributing.
Large in there.
Yeah, just to make it equal, because we said large, and then, or we could just say donation and not even have to.
And we could remove donation, then okay.
Take the large out.
I think large removal would be good.
Okay. So this is.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, that's it. I'm not seeing any other discussion. So the proposed amendment is on on lines, to delete lines 414 through 415 and put in number 5, if an LEA accepts a donation, the LEA shall prevent potential inequities in schools within the LEA when distributing the donation. Okay, let's vote on it. All in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Okay, we're back. We're back to the
Turn away free money.
amended motion, and that is the motion before the board is that the committee, is that the board approve R277-407, draft 4 on second and final reading as amended. I'm not seeing any further discussion, so let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
I just have the one no. Motion passes. Chair Belknap, please continue.
Wow.
Thank you. That ends my report.
Dinner's been waiting for 2 hours, but we were planning on, you know what, we're just going to be here. We need to have our break and eat.